Good evening, and welcome to the City of Dublin's Architectural Review Board. For those of you in the audience, this meeting is being streamed. You can access the video of this meeting or future meetings on the city's website. If anyone is watching right now, this meeting is being held at 555 Perimeter Drive in the city's council chambers. The meeting procedure this evening for each case will begin with a staff presentation, followed by presentation by the applicant, followed by clarifying questions from our board. Then we'll see if there are any public comments on the cases, and then the board will deliberate each case. Lori, will you call the roll, please? I see that. We'll get to the pledge. Do you want to call the roll? Yeah, I see that. I've tried to change things up.
Okay. Mr. Alexander.
Here.
Mr. Cotter.
Here.
Ms. Cooper.
Here.
Mr. Jewell.
Here.
Ms. Damiser.
Okay, well, everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay. Some of you were commenting about the minutes from last meeting. Is there a motion to accept the documents into record and approve the minutes for the meeting of June 27, 2022?
I'll move to accept and approve the minutes and documents.
Okay.
I'll second.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
Ms. Damiser.
Yes.
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 Okay. All right. Thank you. Our board is responsible for the review of construction, modifications, or alterations to any site in the area subject to architectural review under provisions of the zoning code section 153.170. This board has a decision-making responsibility in these cases. Anyone who intends to address the board this evening will be sworn in. So if you're going to address us tonight, please raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board? Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Moving into our cases. Our first case is 109 South Riverview Street. This is for exterior site modifications. This is a minor project review. Is a request for site modifications to a single-family home on a 0.74 acre site zoned historic district, historic residential. The site is southwest of the intersection of Penny Hill Lane with South Riverview Street. And Ms. Molinax will be our presenter.
Thank you and good evening. This is a request for review and approval of a minor project for exterior modifications to an existing single-family home located at 109 South Riverview. The 0.74 acre site is highlighted here in yellow and is located at the intersection of Penny Hill Lane and South Riverview Street. The site is zoned historic district, historic residential, and is surrounded by single-family homes also zoned historic residential, as well as mixed uses along South High Street zoned historic South District. In this aerial, we can see that the original part of the home fronts on South Riverview Street, and then various additions expand behind it. So the home was built in 1827 and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It is also recommended contributing to the historic district, as noted in the Historic Cultural Assessment. There are historic owners associated with this home, including Charles Sells and Dr. Eli Penny. Dr. Eli Penny is a known Underground Railroad sympathizer, and Dr. Penny used to communicate to those escaping to freedom through a hidden speaking tube, which is connected from the fireplace of the home to the exterior on the southern elevation of the brick wall. And then lastly, the stone walls shown in front of the home on Penny Hill Lane are non-historic, as well as those on South Riverview. So there have been various minor project reviews over the years. Most notably in 2018, improvements for a master suite addition and the location of an open and uncovered patio were approved by ARB amongst other items. A condition of approval addressing the at-grade patio was approved by ARB, which stated that the final details associated with the at-grade patio be approvable by planning through issuance of a CCPA, provided that the design is deemed appropriate and that the general size and the location do not change. And so with that, it's important to note why this application is back before the ARB this evening. And that is because the original size of the patio was noted as 700 square feet, and the proposed patio this evening is 859 square feet, which exceeds the previous size that was approved, as well as additional exterior site modifications which have been added since that approval, which expands the project scope and therefore any administrative approval that could be approved by planning. Additionally, at the 2018 meeting, landscape screening for the master suite was a significant point of conversation. And while landscaping is not within ARB's purview, ARB recommended that the applicant incorporate landscaping along the front of the master suite addition to fully screen it from view, therefore putting emphasis on the original historic part of the home. And so tonight, as mentioned, this case is for review and approval of a minor project for exterior modifications for patio, hardscaping, and then removal of 2 trees. So these are the existing conditions on the north and east elevations. Note the location of the existing stone walkways in the middle picture. The existing conditions pictured here show the additions on the south elevation, noting the master suite addition in the middle picture. And then the picture on the right shows the south elevation of the original home. And this is where the Underground Railroad speaking hole is located, kind of closer to grade and on the original brick wall behind the bushes there. And then the existing conditions here show the north elevation along Penny Hill Lane, and then the south elevation of the porch on the backside of the garage on the far right. And lastly, the first image shows the other side of the existing stone walkways in the front of the home. The second and third pictures show various unsafe conditions within the front walkway, which leads to the main entry of the home. Several stones within this area are just really unstable and therefore a safety hazard. So the applicant is proposing to construct an outdoor living space, which includes an 859 square foot patio, replacing existing entryways and walkways with new materials, and then constructing about 871 square feet of new gravel walkways, which would be connecting to the front of the home, to the outdoor living space between the master suite addition and the garage. Before diving into greater detail on the project, it's important to understand features which are existing versus proposed. So the existing features are shown here in green and indicate areas which are proposed to be replaced with new materials. And then features highlighted in blue are new additions to the site as well as new materials. And then lastly, the district maximum for lot coverage is 45%, which the applicant has met. So first I'll touch on where materials are located, and then I will highlight the work proposed on each elevation. So highlighted here in blue is the thermal bluestone, excuse me, and is proposed to be used for the entryways and the steppers, which flank both entryways on the north elevation. And then this material is also seen for the steppers leading to the Underground Railroad speaking hole, as well as the uncovered patio on the south elevation. And then we have proposed gravel paths, which are indicated in pink. These are shown on the northeast and south elevations. Note that the dark and light gray shading distinguishes existing paths versus new paths. And next, we have limestone, which is shown in orange. This material, is proposed for various items across the site, including treads, custom coping to be added on stone columns, the front walkway, and edging for planter beds. Next, we have Oakfield Stone. So this is proposed also for various items throughout the site, which include dry stack stone walls and veneer for features such as the fireplace. And then lastly, there are a couple of additional items to note, such as the wood burning fireplace, which is seen at the southern edge of the patio, and then various drainage grates, which will be added into the patio and walkway areas. Engineering staff has some concerns on where these drains outlet to, and that they are conditioning that the applicant provide further documentation before obtaining a certificate of zoning plan approval. And additionally, staff is supportive of these proposed materials, except for the proposed coping, which is to be added to the stone columns. Adding coping to existing and new columns is not recommended, as it doesn't mimic the character seen throughout the historic district. And then finally, portions of the walkway entries, which are shown here circled in yellow, encroach into the public right-of-way. If ARB is supportive of the proposed walkway changes and the materials, then the applicant is required to obtain a right-of-way permit from engineering to coordinate with the city to be able to construct these areas. And as previously mentioned, the location of the fireplace is at the southern edge of the patio. This elevation is a great visual representation of what that area will look like. These are the new proposed materials. And as you know, ARB was invited prior to this meeting to view samples of the proposed materials at the development building, but due to the weight of the stone samples, those have been left there this evening. Additionally, the applicant is proposing to reuse existing stone on site for the front walkway and leading to the main entry. And the applicant is proposing to remove 2 maple trees, which are shown circled in green here in front of the home on South Riverview Street. And while landscaping is not within ARB's purview, landmark trees are recommended to be preserved to the greatest extent whenever practicable. So with that, the applicant has provided an arborist report, but staff has concerns with the north tree's failure targets of sidewalk and street, since damage to either of these items or features would not be likely and they wouldn't be significant. So with the south tree, the home is reported as a potential target, but the claim risk is moderate, and staff has a lot of concerns with that determination. And so with that, staff would like to see a more detailed analysis for each tree prior to its removal. And that entails the arborist to provide a level 3 assessment rather than a level 2, as the level 3 is significantly more detailed, and they would have the opportunity to identify some new targets. And then lastly, for reference here, highlighted in the green box, this is the landscape area to screen the master suite addition, and therefore putting emphasis on the original part of the historic home. All minor project review criteria are either met with conditions or they're not applicable. And then lastly, planning recommends approval of the minor project with 6 conditions as shown. And with that, the applicant's in attendance this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any initial questions for Taylor?
Nope.
Okay. Would the applicant like to step forward and make a presentation? And when you come up, please identify yourself and your address.
Turn around.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm Carrie Schmidt. I live at 109 South Riverview Street. And first, I would like to really thank Taylor and Sarah for the time that they spent to truly understand our proposal and our project. Well done. I couldn't have done that better myself. You really took time to understand it, so thank you for that. Hopefully what you'll see is what we're hoping to accomplish with this proposal is, first and foremost, we want to increase the accessibility to our house and the safety. There's just been a lot of pieces and parts that have crumbled over time or aren't steady and aren't safe. We've had a few people fall and stuff, so it's really time to update it for those purposes. Second, now with the addition, we want to make the best use of our space for outdoor living. We love to be outside as a family. But at the same time, we are conscious of using our landscaping to make the historic home the star of the show, if you will. So we will use the screening trees to draw attention more to the house than the addition. We'll use other screening to not be able to see the backyard from the street. All of that really with the intention to honor the value and beauty of this home as it is. Maybe you picked up the little notes we added by being careful to still have a very small but noticeable line of sight from the house or from the street to the side of the house, so that anyone on the historic tours can note where the speaking tube location was. And we'll make sure the Historical Society is aware of that as well. And then lastly, what we're also proposing, we try to keep very much in the materiality, consistent with what we're seeing in the district. So I can't add anything more than that. Just thank you for considering.
I have a question. Did I see in one of the documents that if the 2 trees are removed, you're going to replace them with new trees?
Absolutely. Yes, we will. It breaks my heart that those trees are in as bad condition as they are. We love them, and we've taken efforts to preserve them. But the fact is they've just really they've deteriorated, and we've had multiple arborists look at them. Of course, we provide the most recent report. So we would, we'd remove them. We would replace them with trees that we hope will grow to the glory that is currently existing. And then we also intend to add trees around our property as represented in the master plan.
You've probably read the staff report. So how do you feel about the conditions that have been suggested in the staff report?
I think they're very reasonable. I have a few questions I'd be curious for some feedback on. The trees are one of them. I think I'll be very clear, I'm not an arborist, but I can see just from living with those 2 trees that they've just become more and more unstable. They're dropping bark. As recently, a couple months ago, a big limb fell down. So we can pursue an additional round of review from an arborist if we need to, but I just don't feel that would result in anything different. And to be totally honest, with as many pedestrians as are walking by our house, not to mention my own family, I have safety concerns of those trees regardless. So I'm curious for feedback on that. I think that I kind of feel the die is cast on that one. The coping, I'm willing to certainly work with everyone on those pieces, the coping ones I had shared with the team. We thought that was going to be a home run because it was replicating what's been recently done on the retaining walls on High Street, which have the limestone coping over the stone walls. So we thought that was kind of a nice feature, and it would be interesting to replicate it on Riverview. I'll defer to your wisdom on that one. We can live without it.
Okay. All right. I know we had some public comment. I know we had one letter, and I don't know if Mr. Rudy is here to speak to that, but I think if we all saw that, he was in support of the project. Are there any more public comments?
No, there are not.
Okay.
I'm sorry, may I add one more thing I forgot to say? I did want to address the drains. We're happy to work with engineering on that to sort it. In 18, when our construction plans were approved, they included the downspout locations. We're not straying from that. And we'll be tying into all existing utilities. There will be no new tie-ins. And like I said, happy to explain that and work through that with engineering as well, but there should be no surprises there.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Board members, how do you feel?
For me, I really don't have any questions. The tree was the last one. For me, maybe it's more of a discussion between the the groups. I don't know what a tier 2 versus a tier 3, so I'm not quite sure I know what that entails. So, I mean, a homeowner, is it cost a lot of money? I mean, does it take a lot of effort? I don't have any idea of what that entails unless somebody on the board does.
Taylor can fill us in, and then Sarah has a background in landscape as well, so I'm sure.
Sure, yeah, I'm not as experienced as Sarah in this area or as our other staff member who's a specialist in this area as well. But what I can say, the information that they shared with us, is that we just, from a staff perspective, we just want to see, the highest level of detail of analysis as possible to make the best and most informed decision, just because these trees are so beautiful and really make the site. So with that, we thought it would be beneficial for the board, and in their review, well, I guess not in their review, it would be provided after, but it would just be really beneficial in determining whether the removal of these trees was appropriate. And I'm happy, Sarah, if you want to chime in.
Sure. So the way that I understand it, and I've had a little bit of personal experience with some of our maple trees. A level 3 is more of an internal look at the structure of the tree, and that can be done by 2 different methods. And one is to actually take a small boring to see, are there gaps or holes or areas of rot that you can take a look at. And the other is to use something almost like an ultrasound to detect if there's, again, areas of rot or hollows, excuse me. And so this would give a much more accurate picture of what is going on inside the tree structurally and provide that definitive look, because our goal, of course, is to keep every landmark tree that we can that is, in good health and worth keeping.
I have a follow-up question to that. With all of the parks and trees in the city of Dublin, do our arborists have access to that equipment? Do they provide that kind of a analysis?
I cannot answer that. I don't know. I would imagine that they would do that, but honestly, I don't know. We might contract that out.
I'm confused. The board does or does not have jurisdiction to look at trees?
Do you want to answer that? Yes, please.
Very happy to. So yes, for landmark trees, they do, because they're stated in the historic district guidelines that they would be protected. So therefore, it would be under the ARB's purview. Any like other softscaping, landscaping, you name it, would not be under the purview.
Okay, so the new trees that they want to put in front of the additional master bedroom, we don't approve, but the old trees destruction, we do. Got it.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so I have a question for the applicant. If you were to replace these 2 trees, what size replacements would you be able to get in?
I need help on that. While Elena is joining me, I would like to say 2 things. We actually had that boring riskometer test done by Element Arbor a number of years ago. Unfortunately, I can't put my hands in the report, and they didn't have it in their archives available for me in time of submission. I can tell you from memory, for what it's worth, they found that there was places of instability in both trees. It was not a solid, whoa, tear that down right now. It's all mush on the middle, but it also wasn't encouraging prognosis on either trees. I can also share with you that when I asked about if additional assessment was required from the master arborist who came out and took a look at our trees, and we've worked with him for the last 4 years on these trees, he said visually the structure is evident, that if there were going to, be a break, that it would come through the middle and be the entire tree. It's not just like one limb that was at risk. The third thing, before I answer your question, I'm going to take advantage of this moment. The website also confuses me when I look at the tree preservation code on the City of Dublin's website. where it says a tree removal permit is required prior to removal of any protected tree, with the exception of trees on privately owned residential property that are not located in no disturbed zones. That would imply to me I do not need a permit to remove these trees. I called the forester, what's his name? I'm sorry, John?
Brian Goodall.
Brian, excuse me.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. I had a conversation with him where he also confirmed Dublin does not have the resources to be able to approve the removal of every tree of every residence, and it makes perfect sense. But that also left me a little confused. Now, sorry, to answer your question, how big are our trees going to be?
Hi, I'm Elena Andrews. I'm the landscape designer for the project. And for the trees, I mean, I think we would look anywhere between probably a 2 and maybe a 4-inch caliper, depending on the availability and the type of the tree. Anything bigger than a 4, I think you start to risk. I mean, even though you might have that impact of, yes, it looks good, but sometimes the shock of having a larger growth tree in there, it's not going to take as well in terms of kind of setting new roots and growing. And so we'd probably be looking anywhere, a minimum of 2-inch caliper, probably a maximum of 4. But one of the things that we've also tried to do within the landscape plan is add a lot more trees in around the perimeter site and in various different areas, knowing that those 2 large caliper trees are coming down, that we want to try to get as much, kind of replacement material as possible.
Just a piece of context for the other board members, there's sort of an informal line of these trees about that same distance back from the street. Further down the street, it's more evident. After this house, there's kind of a break. So there are a series of trees that are same age, same height. And in fact, one of the new home that's on the same side of the street relocated further down, further to the south, relocated their driveway in an attempt to preserve one of these trees. So it's clear where the staff's recommendation is coming from. And I think that staff's recommendation is not that you can't tear the tree down. So, and you would not come back to us. Would they come back to us if the report indicated that it was a higher risk than the initial report did?
So the condition that's before you, it's number 3 here, would give staff the opportunity to review that new arborist report and then approve it if the ARB feels comfortable with that condition.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts about the tree?
Well, for me, the question would be if it comes back, I mean, will it be conclusive or inconclusive? That's my question. It's going to come back and say, maybe in 1 or 2 years. I mean, it's going to come, just reading the one that came back a level 2, take it down over the next 2 years, I think, something like this. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if it comes back and says that, what's the outcome of that? Because I mean, or if they say 2 to 5 years, for me, if they come back and say, well, we're doing the building now, I'd like to take it down now.
Mm-hmm.
What's the outcome from staff if it comes back with saying, okay, it needs to come down in the next 5 years?
So what would happen is our ISA certified arborist and zoning inspector would take a look at that report, look at the information that is provided and either agree or disagree. And I'm sure that level 3 report would be conclusive, either that it is structurally deficient or it's okay.
Not sure I agree. The
So-
level 2 says it's somewhere in between. I don't know how they come back, but I'd be
Well,
concerned
can
we're
we-
gonna get caught in this loop that they're going to have to do something else. Is that, I'm just trying to understand what we do if it comes back like that.
Or what if she's able to locate through the archives? You mentioned you're trying to obtain the report that she's already had done with the borings. And it does say that there is indications of, decline or decay, however it would be written. I'm not an arborist.
It wouldn't be as recent as, so it may not give the most up-to-date results if it's a couple years old.
Well, certainly, it would not reflect today, but I think there's a fair assumption that it hasn't probably improved.
but it may not have improved, but it may not have improved, it may not have deteriorated to the extent that we need to approve it. So, or we don't need, but the staff would need to approve it. So if it's just indicating the same things in the level 2 report, then then the trees probably stay. Right?
Not the way I read it.
May I ask another question, or I don't know the
Yeah.
formality, I'm sorry. I mean, assuming I'm told then by the city of Dublin, I'm not allowed to remove these trees, who accepts liability for the risk then?
I'm sure it's the homeowner, but I don't know that. I mean, and they're,
I'm sorry.
it would be the homeowner, I'm sure. I mean, it's beyond your.
Right, so that puts me in a really tough position, doesn't it? I mean, like I said, I already saw one pretty significant limb fall in the street. Grateful, nothing or no one was hurt. We're here today talking about how important the value of this home is. I don't want to take any risks with the home either, especially after the investment we've made in preserving it. And like I said, it's a very walked street. There's lots of pedestrians that are by our house all the time. My in-laws and neighbor to the north, their hackberry fell down and I watched it fall. It was tremendously violent. It took down the street light. It took another tree out. I mean, thank goodness no one else was hurt. I cannot believe I'm standing before you today begging to tear down trees. I am a big tree lover, but I also am like a person lover. I just don't want to take a risk with these trees. And like I said, you know, I think we all care a lot about this house as well, and we would not want to see it be at risk either.
I have to say, I'm concerned about, I looked at the trees too. It's a concern that we get in this cycle that we're saying we should keep them, and we get in the spot that we're going to have a hard time coming to a resolution. So,
Well, I think we're leaving it up to staff. We're just saying provide more information, and we're requesting for more information, and then staff will decide.
And that
I'm
was,
concerned with that.
yeah, that was my understanding too, is that we can leave this up between staff and they can make the final director's decision or supervisor, whoever and it wouldn't have to come back to us.
Correct, and we would take into account all things like preservation of this house, danger to pedestrians, infrastructure, all of that.
Can we put the shot back up that shows the trees in relationship to the road and the property? Thank you.
And I know there's some right-of-way issues on that east side and on the north side. Where do the trees kind of impinge in a little bit on that right-of-way as well? Is that right on the border of the right-of-way? That you would have some discussion with the city about where that right-of-way is?
Yeah, the trees and the proposed trees would be inside the property line.
Inside the property line, okay.
Looking at the drawing that we have up on the screen, it appears that the base or the main caliper of the tree is right on the property line. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, and it might be helpful to show the images as well. That implies a pretty small canopy. If we look at the actuals of the actual pictures, you can see that they actually are quite a bit over the road, both roads, and, you know, near some of the lines. I don't know if that's easy to pull up or not. On that one, you can see the significant hole that's in the side. The squirrels love it. It's pretty big. That was one of the areas that showed that there's damage to the structure. One of the things we explored is if we could just limit it up, reduce some of the weight in the canopy, would that make it safer? But because the structure frailties are so low in the tree, the arborist didn't feel that that was going to really fully correct the situation. The other one was cabled previously. It was done incorrectly, I'm told. We endeavored to move some of the cables on the south tree and limit up also, which maybe gave us those extra few years. That initial report was done 2 years ago where he said he recommended removal in 2 years. He came back out and asserted he felt the same, and it now has been the end of those 2 years. So.
Did the city do the review? This would be, I mean, right now we're talking about the homeowner doing something, right, for those trees.
We don't do that. It would be like asking us to design, something else that comes before this board or the Planning and Zoning Commission. We rely on experts that the applicants choose.
Which they
Does the
did.
city provide, since not quite 50%, but a significant portion is in the right of way, has the city done any regular pruning of this tree?
The city has never come to my property to help me with these things.
I was just curious, because it's probably, if this was just a few feet over and in the right of way, it would be out of your hands.
Well, that's interesting.
It's in the right of way.
Okay, so how, as board members, are we comfortable with the language that's there now? I have a feeling Sean has a different opinion.
I certainly do. I mean, I saw the one that was there. I feel we're gonna come back and say it's gonna have to come down in a certain period of time. So I just want to make sure that they don't have to go to zoning appeals or somewhere else to figure out how we do this, right? Because otherwise, I think if it says it has to come down in the next period of time, it should come down, right? I'm just trying to make sure we don't,
Yeah, so I think
very clear way that the applicant can go forward when they're done with this assessment. Doesn't say in the next few years we have to do something and we're left in this. What do we wait for? A few years, or we take it down now?
I believe the coordination of time piece of this would be just coordinated with staff based on when that arborist report is provided, and just, giving staff the time to be able to review that new analysis, and then just determining and coordinating with the applicant on when those would be removed, if that's the determination.
The language does say, subject to staff review and approval.
Mhm.
So I don't think it can be much clearer than that.
For me, they have a report that says it should come down. This is where I think we're caught in this spot.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
we're
It
gonna
does,
take one more
it,
level.
it, it says one, it's, to me, when I read that report, it's not as definitive.
Right. I agree with
for both
Gary.
trees.
Yeah. It's this report, and it's clearly not definitive to staff, that
I get that. And
You
I'm
know,
not arguing that.
right.
I'm okay to go for it. I have a concern that.
based on this report, the trees stay, and if they really want to take them down, they need to convince staff, is really what's going on with another report.
Yes.
Right.
That's what we're.
Yeah.
I'm okay with the way it reads.
How about you, Marty?
well, what if staff and the homeowner don't agree upon additional review? What is the homeowner's recourse? Because doesn't seem to be any recourse built in. Do they get to come back to us and say, I'm sorry, we tried, this is our report, and staff doesn't agree? Do they get to come back to us for that?
I think that would probably be the outcome, yes.
So I think that should be spelled out.
I would agree too, because I think, I just feel like we're putting a burden on the homeowner that somehow they have to have a remedy that if they don't agree. Now they come back and we can come back and say, well, we agree with the arborist or we agree with somewhere else. But I think we need to find a way to, whoever the arbiter is, if there's a dispute, is it us or is it BZA, or who is that arbitrates that? If we can put that in there, then I'm okay.
Am I allowed to talk? I'm
Absolutely.
sorry. So I just want to clarify the point again and ask again. These are on a private resident property, right? So as I read this, it doesn't appear to me that I'm actually required to have approval. And I heard as much when I spoke to the office. So I'm still a little confused. I'm here in good spirit. I want to do what's right. But I also want to understand that, again, this is on private property and you're asking me to take a pretty big risk
Well,
and incur additional expense.
you're in a historic district. And so there are parts of the code that there's other actual language in certain areas that trumps the general zoning code. Also, trees, we've done this before. So we're not reviewing this in a way that we haven't reviewed other projects. Now, if we vote on something and you find there's grounds that our language and everything's inaccurate, city attorney can sort it out. So, but we've done this before. It's in our guidelines that we're supposed to protect these trees and review them. And trees, landscape, your consultant will tell you, landscape has important history too. So, I mean, and just the landscape reflects the development pattern in the community. And that's why I brought up the line of trees along that street. It tells us about the development pattern and the landscape archaeology. So it's important. Your point is understood. And I would say if you have issues, city attorney would be the next place to go.
That's reasonable. Thank you. And I think the question does really come down to one of timing. If it, as stated, I mean, we already have an arborist report that said we've run out our time on these trees. It might say again, we have a couple more years, but we're at a moment in time when now we could invest in the entire landscape so that they can grow very productively and safely in a healthy way. So there's a little bit of that too. I mean, if I weren't investing in the rest of the landscape, I might be inclined to wait it out to the very end. But at the same time, I'm cognizant of the full master plan, and wanting to make the most of that investment as well.
I'm aware of the benefits of planting in the fall, and I think we all are. And you have a great landscape plan, and so we're not able to evaluate that. So you have a very nice plan. But I think we have a process we have to follow here. Anything else on the tree issue for board members? Okay, how about when we go through the other item, the coping, what you're objecting to, and I want to be clear about this because I think when I read this, there are other termination options for that wall. It's just a flat piece of cut limestone across the top of that you're objecting to. Is that right? And that's the element. So, because I think in your report, you point out that there are times there are stones placed on end, almost like a crown that we see on some of the older walls. I've seen some where it's the same stone, but it comes up and levels out, and you have open grout there. Or at least mortar joints that are exposed to elements as opposed to flat plane. So just to be clear, I think the report is just saying you can terminate that in a lot of other ways. We're just looking for something that is a little bit more historic. It's just that flat piece of limestone across there.
Understood. Yes.
Okay. Do any board members have any issues with that? No. Okay. So I think the applicant has told us that she's in agreement with 1, 2. We talked about the tree. Okay, the coping. Certificate is item 6 is pretty standard. And item 7 is pretty standard too. So we understand your reaction to the issue with the trees. I don't think there's support amongst us to remove that as a condition. But everything else you understand. And do you have any more comments on the other issues on here?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the only thing is in terms of meeting with the engineering and talking about the right of way, I can completely understand. I didn't see anything on there. If there's anything about with the first one, item number 1, the stormwater. So is that literally just, do we talk with the engineer and say, yes, this is good, here's the plan, and we're tying into everything that's existing? And does the engineer have the ability to say, oh yeah, that's fine, you don't necessarily have to then, submit anything? Or is that we're definitely going to have to include the CZPA as a part of that? I think that's just a question just in terms of procedurally. If we meet with them and they see the plans and they're like, oh yeah, we're good, we don't have to worry about it, are you or the engineer able to be like, yep, you don't have to sign off, or do we have to, is that a definite thing that we need to plan on doing?
That is a definite item that you do need to plan on. Really, it's just coordinating with engineering and then with myself to ensure that documentation is just provided of where those outlets are going to. I think engineering was looking for further documentation of the architectural plans that were mentioned on the plan set, just where we struggled in our records to find that outlet information. And so just providing that documentation to engineering, and it's just as simple as doing that before filing for a certificate of zoning plan approval.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other conversation on this?
I have one other question just on process. Given these recommendations and the need to seek the CZPAs for items 1 and 6, and then of course the trees, if the rest is approved, can we begin on those parts while we seek out the other? Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
sure.
Just want to, you know, clock's ticking.
Um,
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve the minor project request with the 6 conditions?
7 conditions. They added the 4th one
All
there.
right.
Yeah.
You didn't update the agenda. Okay, thanks. All right.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Ms. Damiser?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Item 2 is a mural request at 63 South High Street. This is a minor project request. The application is a request for the installation of an approximately 154 square foot mural on an existing garage used for retail on a 0.26 acre lot zoned Historic District, Historic South. The site is northwest of the intersection of South High Street with Everly Hill Lane. Madison's obviously not our presenter, so Sarah, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. The request before you tonight is part 2 of what we heard last month for the pop-up shops at the same address where we talked about the master sign plan. You'll remember that the site is at the northwest corner of South High Street and Everly Hill Lane, and it's on 0.26 acres. And this is the historic 1.5-story home. It's outlined here in blue. And the detached garage, which was built much later, is the subject of this request, and specifically the west side of that garage. The site is surrounded by commercial properties to the north, east, and south, and then residential properties to the west, and the zoning is historic south. And you'll remember back in February of this year, the Historic District Task Force started an initiative to improve the South High Street vitality, and City Manager Dana McDaniel presented an opportunity to City Council to sign a lease for this property with the specific goal of having rotating vendors and artists to bring this vitality and pedestrian activity down to South High Street. So in July, the city actually signed the lease for this property for a year, and the pop-up shops are up and running, and their hours coincide with DORA hours, which works out very nicely. And then, as I mentioned last month, this board approved the master sign plan for the sign in the front yard. So tonight's application seeks approval of a mural, and the mural location is where the yellow line is noted on the plan here. It's primarily on the west facade of the garage, facing the open lawn where there are more vendors, sometimes musicians, and other activities going on. And then on the south side, there's an approximately 24-inch by 24-inch, I call it a teaser, on that edge of the garage to draw your attention around the corner. And we'll see that in just a moment. The mural is approximately 7 feet high and 22 feet wide, totaling 154 square feet. And it's in Dublin appropriate colors and designs with fairy wings, a fairy door, shamrocks, and then the proposed flowers match the flowers in the planter boxes on the front of the home. And here you can see that the intent is to have visitors stand between the wings, take photos, and post them to social media. As I had mentioned, the mural extends approximately 4 square feet on the southern facade of the garage, and this again is to entice visitors around that corner. And the mural is obviously pedestrian in scale. It encourages the visual interest and pedestrian interactive elements that align with our historic design guidelines. All of the criteria is met or not applicable. Planning staff recommends approval of the proposed minor project with no conditions, and we're happy to answer any questions, and staff is here, and also the artist is here tonight. And thank you.
Any questions?
No.
Would the applicants, oh, Mike, we're gonna, okay, would the applicants like to come forward? I ask later.
Kendall Blake, 5200 Emerald Parkway. Good evening, members of ARB. Like I said, my name is Kendall, and I'm a management analyst here with the City of Dublin. My colleague, Emily Gulliver, who is also a management analyst, is here as well. Thank you for the opportunity to be before you again this evening. As a reminder, Pop-Up Dublin is a rotating retail and art experience. To date, we have had 77 vendors apply to participate in the pop-up shops, and we've had 7 successful markets thus far, 8 if you count the one currently going on as we speak. We will run through December 17th, but council will have the ability to extend the shops through the full length of the lease, which is June of 2023, based on the success. So the key components that make up Pop-Up Dublin, what it is the community engagement and the respect to this historical significant home. We believe that the mural that Ms. Holt presented will help activate the property and encourage pedestrian traffic along South High. The mural design is intended to combine the features of the home, incorporating the flowers planted in the window boxes, and include Irish elements such as she said, as fairy wings, shamrocks, and a small fairy door in the corner. The Ferry Door Trail brings so much pedestrian traffic to historic Dublin, and we really want to capture the energy around it. The flower choices continue to pay homage to Polly Richards, who is the longtime owner of the home. As the weather turns, we will be changing out the flower boxes to coincide with the fall plantings the city has throughout historic Dublin. Since the red geraniums won't survive in the cold weather, we wanted a more permanent way to recognize Miss Richards and her infamous red geraniums. Dublin Jerome Senior Cecilia Martina designed the mural and will paint it should the board approve the design. She is here tonight and available to answer any questions that you may have for her. And finally, we did, prior to the last time we came before you, we did go door to door to speak to the adjacent residents that live to the west of the home in sightline of the mural space. Of the residents that were home, they were excited about the mural and really pleased to see Polly Richards' love of geraniums come through on the design as well. Thank you again for the opportunity to present to you on this exciting proposal. The mural will be really helpful to us to increase visitor traffic and make Pop-Up Dublin a success, both in person and hopefully online. We are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
I do have a question. How will the mural be maintained, especially after the lease is over, if the city doesn't continue this?
So we did speak to the homeowners and got approval before we executed the lease that they were acceptable with this mural. And we also stated that if they wanted us to, because at the time we hadn't come up with the design yet, if they wanted us to, we were willing to paint it back white to match the current existing conditions.
Okay.
And I assume if the city is still in control of the property through the lease, that the city will maintain it.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Did we have any public comment?
We have not.
Okay.
Is there a requirement that if it's returned to a residential use, that the mural be concealed or replaced with a white wall, appropriate color to the historic district?
There is not that requirement.
And we did approve the mural at the toy store.
Yeah, which really turned out well, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's right in the heart of the commercial area. I was just asking if this becomes a residential place.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, is what happens to it if it's sold after the lease.
That does, excuse me, it does lead to a question where that both of you raised, that if it gets returned, I mean, if the current owner may or may not return it, is there a problem? Would it have to come before us if whoever the owner or a new owner wants to return it to white? Would we have to prove that?
Or would they have to come to us?
That's what I was asking. If,
Change
yeah,
the appearance. Is that-
To paint it back white?
yeah, right.
No, because we would guide them to choose a white color that is within the pre-approved paint colors, and they would not have to come back before you unless they wanted to divert from those pre-approved colors.
But in the event that the property is no longer used for pop-up Dublin and is used for a residential home again, how does the board feel about a mural on a residential property? And what if they want to change it to, a different picture, something less Dublin-esque perhaps?
Well, if they change it, if it's a color, they would go to staff. But if they change it, they have to come to this board. But it would be, now you could look at I look at a couple ways. It's a block wall. It's not like this is an example of historic architecture that we're painting. It's not on a historic structure. So I see granting some latitude. But if you were to buy this house and that's on there and you change it, you have to talk to the staff or come back to us if you're going to put another mural. I mean, that's a fair question. No one has requested a mural on a residence. And then there's signage issues too that you could bring up, signage code. But well, yeah, but different.
Say that again? It's like a sign, right? I mean, that was the first thing I looked at. It's but it's a mural, so but that's the first thing. It's like a sign.
Well, I'm in favor of the mural. I'm just concerned about the extension of the mural to other properties specifically, or this property if it is no longer a business enterprise.
I think that's what Ms. Blake was getting to, is that the offer with the lease that's in place is that should the property owner wish the city to repaint this over at the end of the lease, the city will do that.
But to answer Marty's question, I don't think there's anything that says you can't put a mural on a house, on a residential structure. I don't know of anything. So we wouldn't be creating if this is sold after the lease is up to its original use, I don't think we'd be creating an unusual precedent by having this house. Now, we may get other applicants, and if they're inappropriate, the board would just say, no, it's inappropriate. But other thoughts on that?
Just a good question, but we'll take that one when it comes up. And they're going to review this again in 6 months and then determine if they want to continue with the full one-year lease, correct?
Correct. So we will go back to council probably early January after the 6 months have ended and we're able to give a full analysis of how the event went.
Okay. Do we in fact then have some communication of concerns on our side of you know, what's going to happen in a year with the mural in regards to the district. So just a thought. Have, you know, at that point, if the city decides they're not going to continue on with the thing, what's written in there, in fact, how that mural should be handled from that point on. So just a point of discussion.
I think they've already indicated as long as the city has the lease, they're going to maintain it even if they don't run the program.
Okay.
Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Or that they return it to its original state as painted white. Because it can be expensive to continue to maintain a mural of detail. And perhaps that should be a condition, is that in the event that it's no longer used for a pop-up Dublin, that it be returned to.
Why do you feel it would need to be, if the city's willing to maintain it and they're going to take responsibility, why do you think it would need, why are you tying this to use specific?
I think my concerns just step back to the opportunity for the property owner to begin to use it as a residential property, or to sell it to a subsequent owner who wants to use it for, and put, I don't know, what's the old tobacco on the barns murals they used to have. That's all. I'm just concerned that that we're not making a precedent for mural advertising in the historic district.
I mean, if you advertise, it's a sign, right? So for me, it'd be a completely different thing.
Okay.
Then they would have to come back. I mean, if somebody came back and said, hey, I'm going to advertise my business in here, then it would have to come back as a sign. And so I don't see the risk too much.
But you don't think pictures of hard hat guys on the side of the wall would constitute advertising? Or pictures of slide rules or something else? I'm not trying to be anti-mural at all. I'm trying to be, I guess, protective of the Architectural Review Board's rules and the Historic District's rules. And in the case of the mural that's by the toy shop, that is essentially an unusable space. That was just really a dead zone on a main street, and adding the interest of the mural was really a great idea, and the fairy garden. And I think this is a good idea because it pops out and people are like, what's that over there? But what I'm saying is, if it changes from the city, do we want other people to either be able to just maintain this even if it's on a residence? That's my question. Or do we think the city has an obligation to restore it back to plain white when it's no longer being used for pop-up Dublin? Am I playing devil's advocate here? Am I being too harsh?
As an advocate of public art, I would say you want to keep it, even if this is not used as pop-up Dublin. This is a nice piece, and so we'd want to keep it. It helps animate. It adds.
I wouldn't want to force them to put it back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a feeling, I don't know, but maybe the neighborhood, the residents will start to like it and not want it to go back. And then we'll get really mad at the city if the city paints it over.
And
Especially knowing it's done by a senior at a Dublin school, it's, you know.
no, and again, I'm very supportive of it. You have my vote in favor of it. My only question was, if it's a residence, do we care that there's a large mural on the cement wall of the detached garage in the historic district?
I wouldn't, but I think let's go around the table. So just since you asked the question, let's see how.
I don't have an issue.
I don't have an issue with it either. I don't think that I want murals on every single house in the historic district, but one or two wouldn't bother me.
Yeah, and I don't have an issue. And again, there's other major cities that are doing these type of things in their historic districts to give it some pop and to tell a story. Like I say, I don't have a problem. I think it's great. And like I say, this will be number 2 for us in the area. So it may be becoming more of a, prevalent in future uses too. So who knows? But no, great concerns. So.
The other difference, and I think it does make a difference, as Gary said, it's on the non-historic
Yes.
attached garage. It's not like they're painting it on the back of the Eli Penny house we just saw. It's on the part that's not significant.
Does the artist want to say anything?
Your design is beautiful
Yeah.
It is. We really appreciate it.
and vibrant.
Biggest thing was I chose super bright colors so that it could be super Instagrammable, really get that social media presence for the city, people coming around to the corner of it to see the whole pop-up shop. So I think it would be a great addition to that area to bring people over to that section of Dublin and really, revitalize that historic district. So many people are switching to the Bridge Park area, but personally, I love the historic side of Dublin, all of the small shops. And I think this is like a great way to include some of that.
All right, good comments.
Can you just indulge me for a minute? What are you planning to do when you graduate?
I think I actually want to go into some sort of biomedical science. So I'm a chalk artist most of the time. So I do large scale chalk murals. I'll be chalking at like the Wonderbus Festival this weekend. I've done events for the city of Hilliard, the city of Dublin. I've done things for the Historic Dublin Business Association. And so I'll definitely be doing the art like as on the side as a career, but I think I'd like to be maybe an orthopedic surgeon or something in neurology. So
Right. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
thank you.
Kudos to
All
you.
right. Is there a motion to approve the minor project request?
There is a motion. I will move to approve without condition.
And I
I'll
will second it.
Got a second on that?
Excuse me, Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Damiser,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. You're all approved. Okay.
I will not go down on the record as a
Okay. All right. Next, we have an informational presentation by City Engineering, represented by Brian Gable, to discuss utility relocation project on South High Street. Mr. Gable, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, board members. Thanks for having me here tonight. Like you mentioned, we're going to talk tonight about the South High Street Utility Burial Phase 1 project, informational presentation, and hopefully discuss some of the other design elements and some of the final features of the project. So we're going to talk briefly tonight on the utility burial project overview. We'll discuss the ground-mounted facilities and their treatments, and then also a project timeline. So let's jump right into project overview. So this project, phase 1 of the project, is to relocate overhead utilities to underground for both power and telecommunications within the project area. Phase 1 for phase 1, the project area begins at the north with West Bridge Street, heads to the south all the way down to Short Street. Then from the west is Franklin Street, and to the east is South High Street. As a note, phase 1 is only the west side of South High Street. And we'll discuss phase 2 in a moment, and you'll see some illustration of that. And one item of note with the project is that the AEP distribution primary will be relocated from South High Street, and it'll be going down Franklin Street itself, and it will be underground underneath the roadway. So the areas that will be impacted by the project are seen here. Phase 1 is in blue, and phase 2 is in red. Phase 1 will be the focus of tonight's meeting. North, by the way, is to the left of the screen, with Bridge Street also on the left. I will mention that my images turn 180 halfway through here, so don't worry about that. I'll mention it when that happens. So the poles on South High Street will be removed at the conclusion of the Phase 2 project. One reason why the projects were split into phases was a discussion and desire of AEP to separate out the size of the project itself. So the current zoning of the area is on the screen. The majority of the project areas within the historic district for both historic core, which is red and blue, and historic residential, which is in gray. Only a small area in orange and yellow is outside of the historic district. So here's where I've rotated the direction. All of our plan sheets and plan views tend to be this way. So for clarity, I kind of kept it all the same. So north again is to the right of the screen with Bridge Street on the extreme right, and South High Street is at the bottom of the screen just for orientation. So here we look at the alignment of the buried utility lines. The three-phase distribution, which is AEP's primary distribution lines, will follow South High Street to Waterford, then Franklin Street, all the way up Franklin Street to Sells Alley, and it will terminate at the existing underground facilities at Mill Lane and Bridge Street. So that kind of follows all the way. I think you can see my mouse there. So starts down here at Short and South High, continues up Waterford, goes all the way down Franklin, down Sells, and then terminates here at Mill and Bridge. The single phase distribution, which is AEP's smaller distribution that goes to residents and, residential and commercial facilities, that actually starts here at Waterford, at Waterford, and continues up where I call it Mill Lane, but essentially where Mill Lane would be if it went through down to Waterford. And continues all the way up then to the primary distribution at Mill Lane and Sells Alley. So let's talk briefly about the ground-mounted facilities. So here you can see again, north is to the right. I didn't turn it again, so now it's staying the same here. Bridge Street's on the right, South High's on the bottom of the screen. The red circles on the screen represent locations of ground-mounted equipment. Most of these circles are residential type installations with small transformers and a few telecommunication pedestals. A few locations require larger equipment. All of these larger locations, minus one, are on city-owned property and will receive landscaping, as we'll discuss in a moment. The one that isn't on city-owned property is actually required for supplying power to the building itself. It requires a larger transformer. So here, a lot of text, but I'll just briefly cover through most of it. We've reduced the easement sizes as much as possible on this project. Try to be, have as small of a footprint as we're able to. We've placed the ground-mounted equipment at the rear of the lots wherever feasible. This was something that we went through with the Franklin Street Improvements Project. All of those residents communicated, desire to have those at the rear lot. And also the commercial properties along South High Street will have their facilities located at the rear of their building. So Mill Lane kind of has a high concentration of these transformers as a result. The ground mounted, and obviously we will add screening around these proposed units as well. The ground mounted units vary in size, as you can see on the screen. Residential units tend to be 3 feet wide by 3 feet long and 2 feet tall. Larger units on city property can be as large as 6 feet wide by 6 feet tall, 6 feet wide and 6 feet long and 4 feet tall. The telecommunication pedestals are generally quite small. Most of these are only 1 by 1 in terms of width and length, and only about 1 foot or 2 tall at most. The telecommunication pole boxes are flush with the ground, and those vary in size but tend to be about 2 feet wide and 3 feet long. So here's a few representative examples of what a typical residential ground-mounted facility installation looks like. I will say I don't love these, and these will not be the typical installation for this project. These are usually installed at the beginning of subdivisions or other things. And each utility kind of installs them a little bit, a little bit separated and apart from each other. So our installations are going to be done all as one project with one contractor. They're going to be located much more tightly and snugly together. And then as a result, we will be able to do a little bit more screening around that, because this is a city sponsored beautification project. We're going to provide some additional screening and landscaping around all these facilities. This is a good representation because, you see one transformer generally, which is the larger box here. And I say larger here, those are, again, only about 2 by 2 by, or I'm sorry, 3 by 3 by 2 feet tall. And then there's some pedestals beside there. So these are two representative examples of the ground-mounted units involved. On the left is a more typical residential installation, which involves one electric transformer, 3 telecommunications pedestals, and 2 telecommunications pole boxes. One of those is actually a combo, so I listed it actually in both, so there's one fewer really in all reality. On the right is actually the largest installation on the project. This is located on city property at the corner of Mill Lane and Sells Alley. This location has an electric switchgear, 300 amp transformer, a small residential transformer, an existing city lighting controller, 3 telecom pedestals, and 2 telecommunications pole boxes. Screening is an important part of this project. So to obscure the ground-mounted equipment, the project will be installing landscaping around them. The proposed landscaping is being coordinated with AEP and the telecommunications companies. What is being provided is closer to the units than typically desired by those companies, but with the limited area and locations that these units can be installed, AEP has made allowances for these installations, and we've worked with them rather closely to make sure it still meets all of their policies. So the plantings are a combination of boxwoods, citation yews, feather reed grasses, hydrangeas, and junipers. The grasses are typically required at locations where AEP will occasionally need entry to the sides of the units where the doors and not windows, where there are openings and where there are doors for the equipment itself. And just as a note, I did use the same 2 locations here in this photo and as well in these. I know these are not great imagery, so I talked with our landscape architects to work up some renderings for the areas. So this is that larger installation that we talked about. We've reviewed the location for placement of landscaping while ensuring the site distances along Sells Alley and Mill Lane are still unobstructed and allow for plenty of stopping site distance for people to be able to stop and be able to see both ways and pull out onto Mill Lane. So this is one view. Here's another angle of the same rendering and facilities. As you can see, while the units are not completely hidden, they will be significantly obscured and will be much less of a focus for the area itself. We feel like this is a really advantageous improvement for something that's almost necessary in order to be able to get this project through. And then here you can see some of the different types of plantings that we are proposing for this area. Again, these are a lot of boxwoods, citation yews, feather reed grasses, hydrangeas, junipers. Not sure how well you guys can see that on your screens, but yeah, there's a quite.
It shows up well.
Okay. So lastly, I did want to go over project timelines for both projects. The first, obviously, is the phase 1 project that's ongoing. So we are currently finalizing design, and we actually began acquisition of easements already. That is planned to continue through October with the property owners. The actual recording of the easements will probably continue a little bit beyond that. We are anticipating beginning construction here in October. Physically in the field, it may be a little later, maybe more like November or December this year. With the final completion for phase 1 in June of '23, more in the spring will happen, what'll happen more in the spring is the actual conversions at each building to convert the power from overhead to underground. The city has to hire an electrician, perform all that work. And then finally, what'll happen at the very end of that project, AEP will de-energize their lines on Mill Lane and on Franklin Street and remove all of those poles. So all the aerial facilities on those two streets will be gone. The aerial facilities on South High Street itself won't be able to be removed until the completion of the phase 2 project. So phase 2 is partnered pretty closely with phase 1. It's going to begin design here probably in October. We will begin acquisition and that process here in January of '23. That'll likely continue until May of '23, and then begin construction mid to late '23, with finally finishing that project and culminating in the project's main objective of removing those utility poles on South High Street sometime in early '24. So with that, I will take any questions or comments that you may have.
Any questions? I have a couple questions. On Mill Street, we have a lot of the back ends of a lot of businesses, and so they have parking lots that aren't. And these parking lots, most of them don't have curbs. It's not real defined where you park, where you don't park. Are you going to incorporate bollards in the design of these areas so people don't back into one of the transformers, or so you protect them from the cars? Because where the street occurs and where the property begins is blurred back there a lot.
Yeah, sorry. Jumping back here. Yeah, so Mill Lane, most of these are actually located on property lines, which generally are pretty far away from where the drive entrances are. There are a couple that'll be in adjacent proximity to them, but those pedestals are actually made to be breakaway. Should somebody hit them, they usually just bend or they just break. Yeah, so it's not too much of a concern other than to the person who runs into them mostly, and then the company that has to fix them, obviously. They are going to be obscured, but to install bollards is a bit difficult because these installations are on private property with easements, of course. But those bollards are much more intrusive and tend to be painted yellow and stick out pretty badly.
Well, you could do something in the landscape. If you're not concerned, we're not concerned. But some of the uses that we've reviewed, if they're built, will have a lot of traffic in and out and along there. So I think there are ways you could make a bollard that blended with the landscape. But if somebody backs through the landscape, they're not through your transform. But that's your call. Just a question.
Yeah, the majority of the facilities are underground, so those transformers tend to be pretty robust. They can get knocked off their foundation and still be in working order. Generally, all AEP will have to do is just come back out, shift it, place it right back on. I mean, unless you hit it at 20 miles an hour, which hopefully out of a parking lot, we're not working with that kind of speed.
I backed into a telephone pole back there, so maybe I'm speaking from personal experience. But that Mill Lane is narrow, as you know. The other question I had, the street looks so good now since the walls went in and since it's been repaved. Is any of the utility relocation and the pole removal going to disrupt South High Street? What's already been done there?
No, and actually, these two projects are really not necessitated. They are important to be completed by '24, so that we can remove those pole lines before AEP gets tempted to cut down our new trees that we put up. So we anticipate those trees to be able to grow into a point where they're not conflicting, but close to AEP's range of where they tend to trim active lines. And I'm sorry, where they tend to trim trees within a distance of active lines. And so we anticipate that to be probably around 25, that'll be pretty close. So we really want to get the lines down on South High Street so that we won't have negative impacts to that property. That installation was taken into account with this project in mind. It did dodge a lot of those trees, but I'm sorry, the trees and the installations did dodge a lot of the poles that are there. But there's one or two that are right within the tree planting areas. And so obviously we want to get those poles out of the way before, they cause too many trouble, before the two interact with each other poorly, so.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for updating us.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the back of their property. That would be at the other side. All right. Our next presentation is by City Transportation and Mobility. It's represented by J.M. Rayburn. He's going to discuss bird scooters in the historic district. So,
yes, and give me 1 second, please.
Okay.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be back before the Architecture Review Board. You may remember me when I was in the planning division and presented a few cases. Now I'm in the Division of Transportation and Mobility, and I'm going to talk to you about what I think is an exciting project, but based on my experience, half of you will love it, half of you will hate it. So we'll see how this goes this evening.
That's not a good way to start.
Well, we're going to have fun with this, right? We'll have fun with it. We'll keep an open mind. We'll talk through any questions. It'll be fine. But let me start off by saying micromobility is a great term to explain everything that's bikes, scooters, and everything in between. These are usually devices that could be rentable. You'll see bird scooters in our community, those rentable scooters. They also can be private. We are looking to partner, or we are partnering with 2 operators, specifically Bird and their electric scooter product, and Kogo Bike Share, which is the bike share based in Central Ohio, starting in Columbus, and has expanded to other suburbs, most notably Bexley, Grandview, and Upper Arlington. We'd like to be added to that list and join the region in that respect. When we looked at the demonstration pilot, we did vet this heavily with the Public Services Committee of Council. They provided great feedback on a variety of things, ranging from the boundary itself to phasing this. So you'll see this is phase 1 that we're currently in with the geography in front of you in the outline in purple. We do have Kogo stations that have been identified, which are in green on your screen with the little bicycle icon. So we're hoping that as we introduce these new operators and new modes of transportation, it will satisfy some of the goals that the city has, which is mode shift to 1%, which is explaining, if you don't know what that is, it's basically saying instead of people driving by themselves, we want to see if they can shift to a different mode of transportation, whether it be bicycling, walking, scooting, other things of that sort. This pilot did launch on May 1st with Bird having 30 scooters in our community. So you'll probably have seen them throughout Bridge Park and historic Dublin and everything inside this geography. But we're all here to talk about what does this mean for historic Dublin. So there are 6 components that are currently in play that have an impact on historic Dublin or within the boundaries. I'm going to talk about a historic Dublin mobility boulevard. It's very similar to a bike boulevard if you're familiar. I will then talk about some designated parking areas for micromobility devices, whether it be scooters, traditional bikes, e-bikes, so on and so forth. I'll talk to you about an exciting e-bike charging prototype that we're working on. Then I'll talk about slow zones that are associated with the Bird, in particular, scooter system. So we have slow zones, we have other restrictions, such as no ride zones, and I'll get into what that means and how that impacts the district. I'll begin with what we're calling a mobility boulevard. We are framing this off of the Bike Boulevard guidance from NACTO, and that is an organization that provides all sorts of transportation-related guidance and studies and what have you. For bike boulevards, NACTO guidance does look at vehicle miles per day. It also looks at speeds. So speeds and volumes determine if this would be a comfortable ride for someone that is on a bicycle or other micromobility device. As it turns out, we have a great parallel route on Darby Street and Mill Lane that is a parallel to High Street. High Street has narrow sidewalks. Sidewalks can be brick pavers, other things that may not be the best conditions for a scooter or a bicycle. So we want to provide a parallel route that these devices can be used on. And that is the intent of keeping pedestrians safe on High Street, but also not causing any headaches for both the people who are riding bicycles and scooters, but also driving and what have you. As you think about this mobility boulevard, it's important to think about where people can park their devices. Thankfully, we have a good amount of bike racks that are present in the district. Those are shown on the screen in red circles. So we have a good amount of bike parking, or bike racks, I should say, at the northern part of the district. But when we look on this mobility boulevard, there are opportunities to add more where there are not. And so I will talk about some of those opportunities. In particular, we're looking at Mill Lane, where we have that mobility boulevard, and then the John Wright parking lot where the Chamber of Commerce is located. So here's an aerial looking at the mobility boulevard and surrounding context. The orange box in the middle, or rectangle I should say, is where we want to convert a current on-street parking spot into a designated space for bicycles and scooters and micromobility devices to be parked. And you can see that the mobility boulevard is outlined in yellow parallel lines in the middle of the screen. As you look at the street view of what this could look like, to orient yourself, we're looking at Mill Lane looking south, and we have the mobility boulevard outlined in yellow. To the right of that is the proposed micromobility parking area where there's currently an on-street parking space. And next to that is an existing bike rack as well as bench and wayfinding sign. So we thought this can be a good area. We have some protection on 3 sides of the parking space, but it's also on the mobility boulevard, and it's next to already existing infrastructure that would support some bicycles or other mobility options. The other area that I mentioned was the Dublin Chamber of Commerce parking lot, also known as John Wright parking lot. This is where the mobility boulevard swings towards High Street, and it's at the southern end of the boulevard itself. And this would be an opportunity to provide parking where there is none. As you look at the street view, we're looking at the corner of the intersection of Mill Lane and John Wright Lane. And you'll see in the center there's a landscape bed, thank you, I couldn't think of the word, with a tree in it. We found this area that's 70 square feet where we're gonna put pavers, and we're gonna create a parking area for scooters on these pavers. We're not proposing to remove any of the parking spaces at this time, though we have informed Public Services Committee that if it need be, we would add temporary bike parking in the parking spot next to the pavers during the pilot to see if that meets demand, if that satisfies demand. We also noticed we have a nice little sign next to it that has a scooter and a parking symbol. These pavers are unique, and they do glow in the dark, which is kind of a unique component to them. They have little chips in them. So the thought is, yes, they look great, or they look appropriate, I should say, in terms of earth tones to blend in with the context where they're located. But we thought, since there's a lack of lighting in this area, that can be an interesting indication to grab your attention and hopefully have people gravitate to park their scooters there. It's something very new that we're trying out. We hope that we're successful, but we'll find out. I did mention an e-bike charging station. We're going back to the on-street parking spot I just told you about that we want to convert. Since we're going to convert this spot, we figured, why don't we try e-bike charging? I was at a conference last year and someone said that that's what forward-thinking cities are doing. And I talked to my team, I said, can we do this? And we looked at all sorts of opportunities to purchase e-bike charging, and most of them were in Europe and were very expensive. And we also had concerns about getting them here in a timely fashion, given the history we've had with logistics. We are fortunate in Dublin to have an electric crew, and they were able to work with us to develop a prototype at this location. So we're going to do this in-house Again, if we're successful, it's something that we can share with the region and other partners with ours, but we think this can be a good cost-effective solution to introduce more e-bike charging in our region. So we want to start here. We have talked to a vendor to give a color treatment to the pavement to indicate that this is a different parking spot. We're going with a very Dublin green color that meets brand standards. We have checked this with our communications team and they're happy with it. And so we want to proceed with the application during the pilot. We would do also a stencil of different iconography associated with e-bikes and parking symbol and also the scooter symbol. And if you notice, there are 3 black lines just above the e-bike stencil. Those will be 3 bike racks that we want to put inside, and also some other enhancements around the parking spot to help indicate that this is not for vehicles, and this is something that you could catch your attention if you're riding your bike or scooting. Before I get into special zones, are we good so far? Any questions? No? All right, still absorbing it. We'll continue. With the bird scooters, we've heard a lot of great feedback on opportunities to improve the experience. We are relying on Bird and their app to help communicate some of the good etiquette for riding, as well as some appropriate areas to ride and not appropriate areas to ride. You'll see on the left is a high street slow zone. What does a slow zone mean? Well, the scooters can go up to 15 to 16 miles per hour. A slow zone will stop them. Well, not stop them, but we'll decelerate them to 10 miles per hour and cap it at 10 miles per hour. I can tell you as someone who's ridden the scooters, 10 miles per hour is very comfortable very comfortable cruising speed on a scooter. I think on a bicycle, it's around 12 miles per hour. So think of that as a good speed. 15 miles per hour if you're going downhill, you can probably achieve, but I wouldn't feel comfortable riding that in most of the downtown area. So this is meant to ensure that High Street is a slow area, but that Mobility Boulevard just to the west of it has no restrictions. So this is another opportunity for us to help people who are scooting on Bird scooters to bypass High Street and use this Mobility Boulevard as a bypass, or as an alternative route, I should say. These are actual screenshots from the app itself. So when you open the app, you'll see these and you can click on them. So the second one is the Dublin Link Slow Zone. The bridge and both plazas on either side of the bridge are under a slow zone that will decelerate you to 10 miles per hour when you're going over the bridge and within the plazas. The reason for that is these are high pedestrian areas. We want to make sure that people are using these vehicles responsibly and making sure that no one's acting a little ridiculous if they're going very fast or not being mindful of other people. The third image you see on your screen is a garage no ride zone. These were brought to our attention by the Dublin police that there are some underage kids who were racing on garage ramps with scooters. So that was not an appropriate use of the scooters. We worked with Bird to create no ride zones specifically for the parking garages on both sides of the river. So the one I show you here is the Dublin Library parking garage, but you'll see the other ones on the other side of the river are also no ride zones. So when you go into a no ride zone, it will decelerate you completely, but safely, and it'll start beeping at you. So you know you're not doing something right. And there'll be a pop-up notification with the app on your phone to let you know that you're in a no ride zone. Other no ride zones that we've established would be on Longshore Street in Bridge Park. I know we're talking about historic Dublin here, but I just bring it to your attention. That was a high pedestrian area that we wanted to have a no ride zone for pedestrians in that area. And then Riverside Drive, the travel lanes are no ride zones, and that being direction from council and being a high speed roadway. We will be providing an update to council at the October 10th meeting. In the meantime, we have a public survey that is live. I encourage you to take the survey if you so wish. You can access it through the website, which is dublinohiousa.gov/micromobility. Or if you want, I'll leave this up if you want to put your smartphone up and use the QR code to get to the survey as well. We'll collect responses for a while, but at least for the update to council, we need to have responses by September 30th. So that's why we're asking for that date. When we receive all the feedback, we as staff will craft recommendations for council on how to move forward. So that could be either to move forward with phase 2, which is citywide zone for scooters and e-bikes and Coco bike share, or if we want to keep the same geography as it is today, which I saw in that first slide, or if you want to get rid of the pilot early. But there's many other questions in there to help understand what are the mobility needs of the community and how we can best serve them as a city. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
One of the things I've always liked about Dublin is our path system that's separate from the street. So I know serious cyclists don't like it because they don't want to share it with pedestrians, but it's certainly a lot safer than sharing it with cars. Have you looked at, you have your mobility zone, but it's still shared with cars. Have you looked at, it would be nice because it's similar, the city of Columbus has these shared lanes and all the cyclists and even drivers you can't see when there's somebody near you in that lane. Have you thought about, is it just impossible to separate the mobility from the vehicles?
We've looked at that and we're exploring it. So we're talking it through as staff, and it'll be part of our final recommendations to council. But for example, there could be an opportunity that we limit scooters within the travel lanes on certain roadways of a certain speed limit and higher. So perhaps that's all roadways that are 25 miles per hour or 35 miles per hour. We can use the geofencing technology that Bird uses for their scooters, and we can restrict traveling within those travel lanes with cars.
Well, I'm just thinking like the mill lane that we just saw the presentation on. There are a lot of curb cuts there. And so and then they're going to build these landscape clusters around the transformers. And so you're somebody who's on a smaller bicycle, I mean, there are going to be conflicts along there. It'd be nice if you could push it on the other side where we don't have as many curb cuts, or it just seems like if you're making this mobility zone, making it easier for people to use and safer. And then are you going to change the crosswalk? Because when your mobility zone crosses Bridge Street, right now, I know there's a crosswalk and there's a flashing signal. Are you going to do something else there to accommodate?
So these are great questions. For the pilot, we are going to use Mill Run and Darby Street for the Mobility Boulevard. There is a project to extend Franklin Street, and we've looked at Franklin Street as a possible better candidate for a long-term Mobility Boulevard. And we say that because it extends all the way north to the Dublin parking garage, our Dublin Library parking garage, where we are planning a mobility hub. So that's another mobility investment. It would be a nice route to that destination. But then it'll also go all the way down to John Wright Lane, I believe, and cut over to High Street. So we're looking at that, and we'll coordinate with engineering on how to make that mobility boulevard as comfortable as possible, given the mix of vehicles.
Okay. So it sounds like all this is under review.
It certainly is, but during the pilot, I must stress that where this is an evaluation period, we really do welcome feedback and input from the community. So I want that to be noted as well.
All right. Anything else?
I just had a couple questions. So you'll be able to rent the scooters, the Bird scooters in various areas, and you'll have some control with the fencing around them.
Yes, sir.
But as you start to make this more mobility and people bring e-bikes and other things, how do you control, because 10 miles an hour on a scooter is still not insignificantly fast when a person is walking across that bridge at 2 or 3 miles an hour. How do you control, as you start to make this more and more, e-bikes? How do you control that somebody on e-bike's not going to be, once they see this, they're going to be going whatever an e-bike goes, 15 or 18 miles an hour?
Sure.
So how do you how do you envision trying to enforce some, I'm thinking really on the bridge, this conflict that you're going to have with people? And I agree there's going to be some limited sight zones in other places, but how do you limit that conflict when you don't have the control over an e-bike or somebody's personal bike?
Yeah, that's a great question. With the companies and operators that rent this to the public, they do have technology that we can govern speeds and look where they're allowed to ride and what have you. The privately owned fleets will have to rely on education, stressing etiquette on shared use paths as well as the bridge. That will be an ongoing endeavor because you can do it for a while, but then we may have to continue doing it in different fashions. So I'm hoping that a combination of the education and the etiquette can be helpful. The police are great partners with us in this initiative. They prefer not to have a punitive response to these measures. We really want to focus on education as much as possible. So I think in that respect, we'll have to continue our efforts to educate the public on what's appropriate. With the rentable systems, we do have an extra layer of control given our agreements with them and some of the restrictions we can put on in place.
It'd be interesting, some community outreach people down there just trying to stress the shared nature of how we're trying.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And quite honestly, using these scooters, the comfort level is highest on shared use pass. So that was mentioned. We have an extensive shared use pass system. It's well maintained, and it's a nice ride on scooters. You can ride on areas that are brick pavers or sidewalks, but quite honestly, you can feel each sidewalk as you go over it, each groove, if you will. And if we do a great job in Dublin maintaining bricks, paver areas, but you'll find in other communities that might be a challenge. So we're hoping to encourage people to use the shared use pass as much as possible for safety, but also for comfort.
Jam, thank you. And I don't think anybody hated your part of your presentation. So.
Well, thank you very much, members of the Architecture Review Board.
Okay. All right, on the communications.
Yes, indeed. And thank you, everybody, for those informational presentations. I thought that the board would be very interested to hear some of these great projects that are coming to historic Dublin. An update on the alternative materials project that we talked about a couple months ago. Preservation Designs Limited is actually going to continue on with that project. They started it back in 2020. So they are going to follow on the updating of that with an ETA of about October of this year to finish that up. So we'll look to have that brought forward to you around the October timeframe. I also want to mention and remind everybody of the work session on the 31st of August. This is with council and all of the boards and commissions. And I think, Marty, were you out of town? Okay, all right. The main idea is to talk about any policy items that you're struggling with or things that you would like to see changed or improved, or it's just a good chance for everybody to get together and talk about things kind of globally. And don't forget there's dinner involved. So 6 o'clock. And it will be here.
Okay.
Yes.
Assuming dress is business casual, so.
I'm sorry, Mike?
Dress, I'm assuming it's business casual.
Yes, yeah. And then finally, I provided new copies of the historic design guidelines for you. We noticed a text omission in the introduction, fortunately not in the body of, the meat of the document, but these have been reprinted for you, so it has the entire text in there for you. So that's all I have.
Sarah, I want to thank you for having those presentations, because I think Sean brought it up in one of our group meetings where sometimes the ARB didn't know if we'd see a project going on, a public works project or something going on in the historic district, and it would be nice to hear before we see something going on what's actually planned. So that was really informative.
Absolutely, yes. And we will continue to do that as time allows and the schedule allows. And we saw tonight was a relatively easy night, so it's a good time to have these folks come forward. So. And
before we break, I want to just let Mike just briefly tell us about his trip, because I think that was a worthwhile.
Yeah, so I attended that National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. It was down in Cincinnati. I actually attended all the sessions. And I think I sent everybody out the links today. It's overwhelming how many documents I probably sent you. It should be able to link out to it. Obviously, I didn't get to attend all those sessions, but they did share every one of the presentations. And it's kind of typical stuff that we've been sealing. Alternative materials is in there, windows, demolition, murals was a big one. There was a big presentation. Cincinnati's done some pretty amazing things on murals on non-historic type buildings. We're bringing that. But I think it was well worth it. And then they had breakout sessions in the evening too, where we went to historic sites in the evening, and they had a kind of a cocktail hour and stuff as well. So it was well represented. There was people from Alaska and all over the United States in that. So, and it was different, interesting to hear their perspective of how they manage their historic districts and how that's managed within their cities. So I know there's another one again next year. I think that one's in Florida. But I think I learned a lot out of it because this is all new information for me. And we dissected a window for 2.5 hours. So you know how we've talked about muttons. So we did this for 2.5 hours. So, and this gentleman was from Washington, D.C., and just showing us pictures of how, if windows weren't done right and how it impacted. So it was really good information, but you should be able to, when you go out there on that link, click on there, and then there is probably enough of a description. If you see a document you're interested, it's supposed to be the PowerPoint presentation they provided us. So I just want to let you know, it just came out. I just shared it out there today, but I think it's well worth it. I think if we have an opportunity to go again, it was kind of nice to have a few folks there to mingle with, but I also got to meet people that, you know, from all over, the United States. So, but anyway, it's well worth it. And I think next year's a good opportunity if people want to go. I got to compliment the city on how they managed the trip, and it was seamless for me, and Judy did a great job on
wonderful.
managing that. So
Wonderful. I'll let her know. And we do have budget for the board to attend. So if you're at all interested, just let me know and we can hook you up with Judy, who apparently is the perfect
yes,
travel agent, and get you going.
yeah. So if you have any questions on it, you can just send me an email or whatever, and I'll try to help you guide through it. And like I say, I've got the material from what was on there too. So, but thanks.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
Just one thing, I noted on our schedule of hearings that this next month is not the fourth Wednesday, it's the third Wednesday, the 21st. And I just wanted to confirm that.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In case you were going by, oh, we always meet on the 4th. Nope.
Well, and we'll have an opportunity, at the end of the year when the new dates are presented. I know that the staff tries to work around the school system and vacations and holidays. So
Correct.
So we'll have an opportunity to adjust next year's if we need to. If you want them all on the 4th.
No, I just, in my mind, I always know I'm scheduled on the 4th Wednesday, but in this case, it's not the 4th Wednesday, it's the 3rd Wednesday. So I hadn't noticed. If I hadn't have just looked at it, I'm like, oh, that's not actually the 28th, that's the 21st. So there you go.
And you'll notice that happens in November and
December
as
yes,
well.
I knew that for the holidays, right?
Yep. And we will be starting to put together the schedule for all of the boards and commissions probably in October or November. Once we get the schedule from City Council, that's what we work around.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So I apologize that I won't be here for the 31st session. My family plans were made well before that date was set.
Sure. Oh, that's fine. We will send your regrets.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I got one. What's the setting for, or the setting. That's not the right word. We're going to have an open discussion next Wednesday. You said, I mean, I was just going to say, is there something we need to bring up specifically from?
Yeah, there's an agenda of discussion items, but specifically, council wants to hear about any kind of policies or situations that each board and commission might be struggling with.
Okay.
Something that, is particularly difficult, or we've been thinking about the potential for certain applications to be administratively approved, maybe as an option. That's just one thing that, we've been kind of tossing around as a potential. Certainly, we would talk with you before we did anything like that, but it's that kind of thing. Or if there's a particular guideline or code section that is troublesome and causes angst or difficulty. Yep.
Is there a motion? Okay, go ahead.
Move to adjourn.
Okay. All right. I think we're adjourned.
The trees. Yeah, that's a good question.